My name is Tanner Dalton, 23 years old from rural Ephraim, Utah. They told me my dad died in a fire when I was 6. I stood over a closed casket, whispered goodbye, and spent 17 years grieving a ghost. But then I found a letter hidden in his old truck, telling me to meet someone at midnight, behind the old silo. That's when I learned the truth. My father wasn't dead. He'd been erased. And the people who raised me? They were the ones who buried him alive. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a web of lies, betrayal, and a truth buried for nearly 2 decades. Welcome back to the story. I was 6 years old the day they buried my father. The sky over Ephraim was bone gray, and the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and smoke, like the air hadn't let go of what had happened. I stood there in an oversized suit jacket, my hand swallowed by my mother Jolene's tight grip. Uncle Ray stood just behind us, a solemn figure in a black hat that shadowed most of his face. The casket was closed. I asked why. Jolene crouched beside me, her voice syrupy but cold. "It's better this way, sugar. Daddy got caught in the fire. There's nothing left to see." A fire. That's what everyone kept saying. A barn fire out on the far end of the Dalton ranch. Middle of the night. My dad, Ben Dalton, had gone out to check on something and never came back. But the story didn't make sense, even to a 6-year-old. I'd heard no sirens. I'd seen no smoke. And no one explained how a man could disappear so completely that no one even tried to identify him. The funeral was quiet. No slideshow. No eulogies, except for Uncle Ray stepping forward with a folded paper in hand. Ben was a man of few words, he said, his voice gravelly and dry. A man who loved the land, loved his family. He died doing what he did best, protecting what was his. The paper trembled in his fingers, but his face didn't. I didn't understand what he meant by protecting. I just knew Dad hadn't been around to tuck me in for the last 3 nights, and no one would look me in the eyes when I asked when he was coming back. After the service, people murmured their condolences and drifted away. Aunt Sherry pressed a casserole dish into Jolene's arms. Pastor Clark patted my head and said something about angels, but it was the silence that stuck with me, the silence in our house that night. The missing sounds, Dad's boots on the floorboards, his laugh from the porch. The old Hank Williams records he'd play while fixing up the truck. I sat in my room, legs crossed, looking out the window toward the edge of the property. Where the trees met the hills, I swore I saw something move, just a flicker in the dark. Maybe a man. Maybe just wind. I whispered to no one, "Come home." No answer. Just the hum of a house that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. I didn't know then what I know now. That grief can be planted like a seed and watered with lies. That some funerals don't bury the dead, they just hide the truth, and that my dad wasn't in that casket, not even close. The old truck still smelled like engine grease and sun-baked leather. I'd spent most of that summer underneath it, trying to coax it back to life. Dad's '86 Ford, blue and white, rust curling like ivy around the wheel wells. Jolene had wanted to sell it years ago, said it was a ghost with wheels. I'd refused. Told her I needed something to tinker with. The truth was, it was the only piece of him I had left that still felt real. That afternoon, I was elbow deep in the engine bay when I reached for the worn red toolbox tucked behind the seat. I popped the latches, expecting to find the usual, socket wrenches, a busted flashlight, maybe that rusted crescent wrench he swore he'd fix someday. Instead, I found an envelope, no stamp. No address. Just my name, Tanner, scrawled in blocky, uneven handwriting across the front. The paper was yellowed, the edges curled like it had been hiding there for years, waiting. My heart thudded as I opened it. "If you want the truth about your dad, meet me behind the old silo by the reservoir. Midnight. Come alone. Don't tell anyone." That was it. No name. No signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, every part of my body humming with something I couldn't name. Fear. Hope. Anger. Mostly confusion. I glanced toward the house, Jolene's house. She'd be inside, watching some old western with the volume turned up too high. She wouldn't notice if I burned the letter, shredded it, or never spoke of it again, but I couldn't stop staring at that sentence. If you want the truth about your dad, because the truth had always been a slippery thing in our family. Something talked around, never about. Jolene never kept photos of him in the house. Uncle Ray didn't even say his name. And whenever I asked questions, I'd get the same rehearsed response: it was a fire. He's gone. Let it rest, but I never had. Not really. I folded the letter and shoved it in my pocket. That night, I couldn't eat. Couldn't sit still. Every creak in the house sounded like a warning. At 11:47, I slipped out the back door with a flashlight, my heart punching through my chest. The road to the reservoir was dirt and dust, carved through fields and empty silence. The silo sat on the far end, near the edge of the dried-up creek, an old, crumbling tower of tin and rust, forgotten like so many things around here. As I parked the truck and killed the lights, a single question kept burning in my head: was my dad alive? And right behind it, burning hotter, who had lied to me all this time? The moon hung low, fat and yellow, casting long shadows across the gravel road as I pulled up beside the old silo. The place looked even more forgotten up close: rust streaks down its sides, a door hanging by one hinge, weeds curling up through the cracked foundation. The kind of place coyotes might sleep in. Or secrets might be buried. I killed the engine and sat for a second, letting the silence settle. Midnight. No wind. No sounds but my own heartbeat. Loud in my ears, I stepped out slowly, flashlight in one hand, the other twitching near the knife I kept in my boot. Ephraim didn't get a lot of crime, but this whole thing, this note, this setup, reeked of something that could go sideways real fast. Hello? I called into the dark. My voice didn't echo. It just disappeared. Then I saw him, at first, just a silhouette stepping out from behind the silo. He moved like he wasn't sure I'd come. Cautious. Heavy. But when he stepped into the moonlight, I stopped breathing. The man had a familiar frame, broad shoulders, sun-browned skin, work-calloused hands. His face was lined with time, beard grizzled, eyes sharp but tired. But I'd know those eyes anywhere. It was him, Dad. I said, the word catching in my throat like gravel. He gave a small nod. Hey, kid. His voice was rougher than I remembered. Older. Didn't think you'd come. I didn't move. I didn't blink. You're supposed to be dead. I know. They said there was a fire. There was. They buried you. No. They buried what was left of a plan. He glanced away, jaw clenched. I should have come sooner. I wanted to. I took a shaky step forward. My mouth was dry. My skin buzzed. You faked your death. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked up at the moon, as if it could tell the story for him. Then he looked back at me. No. They faked it for me. Jolene and Ray. I froze. What? He stepped closer, slow and careful, like I might bolt. I found out things I wasn't supposed to. Land deals. Missing money. Ray and your mom were laundering the ranch right out from under us. I threatened to go to the sheriff. A week later, I was dead. I shook my head. Why didn't you fight it? I tried. They made it clear, you'd pay the price if I didn't disappear. Jolene said she'd ruin you, twist your head so bad you'd never trust anyone again. So I ran. And just let me think you were gone. I watched you from afar. Every birthday. Every baseball game I could get close to. But you were safe. That's all I wanted. Safe. That word hit me like a punch. I wasn't safe. I'd been raised in a lie, by people who buried the truth alive, and standing there in the moonlight, I realized, the story of my father's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a setup, and it was time I uncovered every piece of it. I leaned against the truck, arms crossed, trying to keep my knees from buckling. Dad, Ben, stood a few feet away, looking like a ghost made flesh. The air between us buzzed with everything unspoken. He exhaled slowly. I didn't want to believe it at first, what Jolene and Ray were doing. Your mother was sharp, always thinking 2 steps ahead. She handled the books, Ray handled the buyers, and I handled the land. It worked, until I started asking questions. I didn't speak. I couldn't. They were skimming off cattle sales, inflating repair costs, selling parcels of land in secret. I found deeds with forged signatures, my signature. When I confronted them, Ray laughed. Jolene didn't. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers like he was remembering how it felt to hold a gun and not use it. She said if I opened my mouth, she'd destroy me. More importantly, she said she'd destroy you. My throat tightened. So you just left. She gave me a choice, he said, voice brittle. There was an old storage barn on the edge of the property. She staged a fire there, planted some of my blood from a hospital vial I'd tossed after a work injury. Ray handled the casket. Local sheriff didn't ask too many questions. Small town justice. And you went along with it? I said, louder than I meant to. You let me think you were dead. You let a 6-year-old bury an empty box. Ben's eyes shone in the moonlight. I watched that funeral from a half-mile out, behind the cottonwoods. I nearly walked out. But Jolene had already filed the insurance claim, already put the ranch in her name. I knew if I came back, I'd be in handcuffs, or a real grave. She'd make sure of it. He paused. And I knew she'd poison you against me if I tried. So I stayed away. Waited. Watched. I lived in Provo for a while. Took jobs under fake names. Then started working up near Logan. Quiet places. But I never stopped keeping tabs on you. I swallowed hard. You said you watched me? He nodded. Saw you pitch in the regional championship at 14. You've got my wind up. I left an envelope in your locker once. Never signed it. I remembered that envelope. A folded 20 and a card that just said proud. I'd thought it was from Coach. I shook my head, too angry and too stunned to make sense of how I felt. Why now? Because Ray's gotten sloppy. Someone's asking questions about the land deals. I figured if it's all coming down, I'd better tell you the truth before someone else does. A coyote howled somewhere in the distance, sharp and lonely. I looked at him, this man I'd grieved for most of my life, and finally asked, what do we do now? Ben's jaw clenched. We dig up every lie they buried. And we burn it all down. I didn't sleep that night. After meeting my supposedly dead father at the reservoir, I drove home in a daze and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Questions swarmed like wasps in my skull. But one thing kept cutting through the noise: they lied to me for 17 years. And they profited from it. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Working at the county clerk's office wasn't glamorous, just part of a state work-study program while I took online classes, but it gave me access. Files. Archives. Property records. And thanks to my boring reputation and Jolene's low opinion of what she called desk jockeys, no one was watching me. That Monday, I walked into the records room like it was any other day. I started by pulling every land transfer on the Dalton Ranch dating back to 2008, the year Dad died. I expected a few oddities. What I found was a maze of shady handoffs. Parcels of land sliced off and sold under LLCs with names like Wasatch Holdings and Three Pines Development. Dig a little deeper and the mailing addresses tied back to a P.O. box in Pleasant, one I remembered seeing in Uncle Ray's glove box when I was 13. Over the next week, Dad and I met at night. Always somewhere quiet, abandoned trailheads. Old irrigation sheds, even the back of the library parking lot. He'd bring hand-drawn maps of the ranch as he remembered it. I'd bring manila folders filled with copies of deeds, bank records, and signed affidavits. Together, we started building a timeline. Ray and Jolene had slowly dismantled the ranch piece by piece. The records showed land sold, then flipped at triple value. Funds that should have gone into the family trust account instead vanished into corporate shells. Even worse, Jolene had forged a living while giving her full ownership rights, something Dad had never signed, but the final blow came on a Thursday afternoon, when I pulled a document stamped 6 months after Dad's supposed death. It was a deed transfer, 20 acres of high-grazing land sold to Ray for $1. $1. Signed by Ben Dalton. I stared at it for a long time, then I held it up to the light and saw it, faint, but unmistakable. The signature was traced. Someone had pressed too hard copying it, leaving grooves in the paper beneath. I called Dad. They didn't just kill you on paper, I said, my voice low. They brought you back. Used your name after you were already dead. His silence on the line said everything. This wasn't just theft. It was identity fraud. Tax fraud. Perjury. They buried you, I said, and then dug you up whenever they needed your signature. Dad's voice came back, cold and steady. Then it's time we gave Em a reason to regret digging. We were no longer just unearthing lies. We were building a case. And revenge was starting to feel a lot like justice. I found the phone in a coffee tin under the floorboards of the shed Ben was staying in. He hadn't meant for me to find it, not yet, but while he was out hauling water, I'd been poking around the cabin looking for anything else we could use. I didn't expect much. Maybe some receipts. Maybe old ID cards. What I found instead was the key to everything. The phone was ancient. One of those brick-style prepaid burners with a cracked screen and sticky buttons. Dead, of course. But I found a charger wedged in the same tin and plugged it into the wall. It lit up with a dim glow. No SIM card. Just a handful of old texts and one saved voicemail. The screen read, March 3, 2008, 9:41 p.m. The night before the fire. I hit play. Jolene's voice burst through, sharp and frantic, like a wild animal cornered. Ben, you think you're brave now? Think anyone's gonna believe you over me? Go ahead, run to the sheriff. You know what'll happen. I'll burn this all down, literally. I'll burn that shed and you with it if you don't shut your damn mouth. And don't think I won't. Because if you don't disappear, if you breathe one word, I swear, you'll burn for real next time. And Tanner? He'll grow up thinking his daddy died screaming. The line went dead. I sat there frozen, the phone buzzing softly in my palm like it was still alive. It wasn't just a threat. It was a confession. One she never thought anyone would hear again. When Ben returned, I didn't say a word, I just handed him the phone and hit play. I watched the color drain from his face. I kept that voicemail as insurance, he said after a long silence. In case she came after me again. I never thought I'd let you hear it. I nodded slowly. It's the nail in the coffin, Dad. This proves everything. He sat down hard on a wooden crate. She always knew how to hit where it hurt. She used you like a loaded gun, and I was too damn scared to pull the trigger back. I looked him straight in the eye. We're pulling it now. Later that night, I copied the voicemail to a flash drive and backed it up 3 times. One for me. One for Dad. One locked in a safety deposit box in Manti. We didn't go to the sheriff yet. Not until the rest of the pieces were in place, but the game had changed. No more whispers. No more shadows. Jolene's voice, her threat, was now our weapon, and the woman who'd buried my father alive was about to learn that some ghosts don't stay buried. The kitchen still smelled faintly of maple syrup and lemon-scented floor cleaner, like it had frozen in time. Same peeling wallpaper, same dented fridge with the crooked magnet shaped like Utah. It was the same room where I used to sit at the counter while Jolene flipped pancakes on Sunday mornings, humming Patsy Cline, but that day, the warmth was gone. Jolene stood at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug, her back to me. She didn't flinch when I stepped into the room. "You're up early," she said, casual as anything. I pulled out a chair and sat down at the table. "Did you really think I'd never find out?" She turned slowly, drying her hands on a towel. "Find out what, sweetheart?" I slid the burner phone across the table. "Play the voicemail." She didn't reach for it. Didn't even glance at it. Instead, she leaned back against the counter and crossed her arms. "Ben's back, isn't he?" she said softly. I felt it in my bones. "You've been jumpy, sneaking out late. Same look in your eye he used to get when something was about to blow." "So you admit it?" I asked, my voice tight. "That he didn't die in that fire? That you lied to me for 17 years? Jolene let out a long sigh, the kind she used to use when I'd spilled juice on the floor. "We did what had to be done, Tanner. He was reckless. Stubborn. He was going to ruin everything your grandfather built. I cleaned up the mess." "You threatened to burn him alive," I said. "I heard you. He saved that message." She didn't blink. "And yet, here he is. Walking and talking. So I guess I didn't go through with it after all." My stomach turned. "You stole the ranch. Sold off pieces like it was nothing. You forged his name, forged deeds, used me like a pawn." She took a step closer. "No. I protected you. Do you have any idea what life would have been like with Ben dragging you down? Living in debt, chasing lawsuits, fighting everyone who got in his way. I gave you stability. A future. You gave me a lie," I said, standing. "You buried my father and expected me to forget he ever existed. You built your life on a grave, and now it's crumbling." She didn't argue. Just stared at me with those icy blue eyes that used to tuck me in at night. "You were better off without him." That was it. No apology. No denial. Just the truth, her truth, and in that moment, I saw her clearly for the first time. Not as the woman who raised me. Not even as a mother. But as a calculating survivor who would trade blood for land without flinching. The pancakes, the bedtime stories, the soft kisses on my forehead, they were tools. I turned toward the door. "This isn't over." Behind me. Her voice followed, "It never is, Tanner. That's the thing about family." But I wasn't hers anymore. Sheriff Daly listened to the voicemail 3 times. Each time, he grew quieter. He was an old-school kind of lawman, wide belt, slower drawl, a man who'd coached my little league team back in the day and used to buy hay from my dad before the fire. I'd never seen him speechless before. But when the voicemail ended and Jolene's threat echoed through his office one final time, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Son," he said finally, "this is gonna rattle some folks." "Good," I said. "They've been sleeping through a 17-year lie." I handed him the rest of the file, deed forgeries. Bank statements, signatures that didn't match, records of stolen land sales. All of it neatly compiled, thanks to weeks of late nights and my dad's near-photographic memory of every corner of that ranch. Daly rubbed a hand down his face. "And your father? He ready to come forward?" "He's waiting outside." That was all it took. By sundown, the sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the house I'd grown up in. The same front porch where Jolene used to shell peas and hum like she didn't have blood on her hands. Ray was there, too, drinking a beer and pretending he hadn't seen the writing on the wall. They didn't fight. Didn't even speak. Just stared as the sheriff read them their rights. Jolene kept her jaw tight. Ray looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. The news hit the town like wildfire. People didn't know whether to believe it. Some didn't. Others, those who'd always whispered about how strange Ben's death was, nodded slowly like puzzle pieces were finally clicking into place. The local paper ran the story front page: "Staged death, stolen land, Dalton family scandal rocks Sanpete County." I didn't give any quotes. But the reporter asked me how it felt to get the ranch back. I didn't know how to answer. Relief? Anger? Guilt? All I said was, it never should have been taken. Dad stood beside me the day we signed the papers. The land returned, the title cleaned, the name Dalton finally back where it belonged. He didn't cry, but I could see it in the way his shoulders shook when he touched the fence post near the east field. The one he'd carved my name into with a pocketknife when I was 4, "This place still remembers us," he said, "but not all wounds heal with truth." That night, I walked through the empty farmhouse. Jolene's perfume still lingered faintly in the master bedroom. A photo of me as a kid still hung crooked on the hallway wall. Justice had come, but the ghosts hadn't left. I turned off the lights and locked the door behind me. The fire they started to erase my father had failed. Now it was their names that were ashes in the wind. 2 years have passed since I turned over the evidence. The Dalton Ranch looks different now, fences rebuilt, the barn repaired, the fields green again under the Utah sun. But even with the land healing, there are places the grass won't grow. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Dad and I live in the cabin we built together on the north edge of the property. It's not fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a wood-burning stove, and a porch that creaks when you lean too hard, but it's honest. Every nail in the walls is ours. Every inch earned. Some mornings, we sit in silence, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise spill across the land. Other days, we talk, about repairs, the cattle, old stories I never got to hear as a kid. He's softer now, and so am I. We lost too much time to anger and lies to waste what we have left, but forgiveness? That part's harder. I haven't spoken to Jolene since the trial. The court sentenced her and Ray to 5 years each, white-collar crime. Fraud, forgery. They served 18 months before being released on probation. No prison could hold the shame that clung to them afterward. Jolene moved into a trailer outside of Gunnison. She teaches quilting at the community center, last I heard. Ray. He keeps his head down, working odd jobs no one else wants. They're still alive. Still breathing. But they're not living. Not really, they don't show their faces in town much. When they do, people look away, or worse, stare. It's one thing to be poor. It's another to be remembered for stealing a man's life. The part that haunts me the most is how quiet it all ended. No last apology. No begging for redemption. Just a look in Jolene's eyes during the sentencing, blank. Flat, like she couldn't decide if she regretted what she'd done or just regretted being caught. I still have dreams sometimes. I see her standing in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like nothing ever happened. I see Ray laughing in the barn, tossing me up onto hay bales. But in those dreams, Dad's watching from outside, locked out of a life he never got to finish. In waking life, we're piecing things back together, one board, one breath at a time. He teaches me how to read the land. I teach him how to check emails and pay bills online. We're both stubborn. We argue. We make up. We try, because love doesn't always come wrapped in warmth. Sometimes it shows up in the ashes, and even now, with Jolene and Ray gone from our lives, their presence lingers. Not as fire anymore, but as smoke, thin, clinging, impossible to ignore, but smoke clears. Eventually, and we're still here, breathing, living, reclaiming what was stolen, and planting something new in its place. If this story gripped you like it did me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new twist. What would you do if you found out your entire childhood was built on a lie? Would you seek revenge? Or redemption? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I read every single one. And if you've got your own story of family secrets or betrayal, share it below. Who knows? It just might inspire the next episode. Until next time, stay curious. And remember, some ghosts don't haunt houses. They haunt the people who buried the truth.